What is up, NFL fans? I'm Jeff Hartman. It's time for another NFL Whip Round. Before I get Coach KT Smith in here, a quick call to action. If you're watching live on YouTube or if you're watching in rerun on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe so that you don't miss anything in the world of sports, whether it's shorts, whether it's YouTube videos. Kevin's been doing a lot of really short call sheet shorts, as we're calling them. Make sure you check those out. And if you're listening in audio form, Apple Podcast, Spotify, give us a 5-star rating, leave us a good review. It all helps. Trust me. We do appreciate it. But with that being said, let me bring in Coach KT Smith. What's up, Coach? How's it going?
What's up, Jeff? Doing great. Can't wait to talk about your favorite non-sporting event, the NFL Combine.
The NFL Scouting Combine. The ongoing question in today's episode is going to be, what does it even mean anymore? Yeah. Like that's going to kind of be the theme of today's discussion about the Combine is, what does it even mean anymore? So let's get this thing started right. And let's talk about player accomplishments. What player accomplishment impressed you the most from this past week's Combine?
Well, obviously some of the 40 times were eye-popping. The receiver from Texas, his name just popped out of my head, running 4.21.
Yeah.
Is mind-boggling. I'm actually more impressed, though, by Georgia offensive tackle Amarius Mims, who measured in at 6'8" and 340 pounds, running 5.07, basically 5 flat at 6'8" and 340 pounds. That is mind-boggling to me. And then when you watch like a guy we talked about on the show last week, Texas's big tackle, the Sweat kid. I mean, he ran 5'2" at 366 pounds, but he looked good doing it. So now I know these guys train for the Combine, and I know that they obviously have practiced these specific drills, but they just keep getting bigger and bigger and faster and faster. And it is watching some of the running backs go through those drills at full speed up close with the camera right on them. And now you see their bodies and they don't have the pads on. And you think to yourself, would you want to tackle those guys? I played strong safety in college. I tackled some big dudes. I didn't tackle anything that looked like that, and I don't think I would either.
Yeah, no, I mean, you were definitely headed in the right direction with what I was thinking as well. And that is that it's some of these big men, watching the way that they move and even the way that they change direction. Because, yeah, you bring up 40 times, and that's impressive and all. But the way that they change direction, I saw this one interior offensive lineman. They were doing a drill where a coach comes up with a pad. And he basically comes up, you're supposed to meet the coach, shed him, and move to the second level. And he threw the coach, literally threw the coach. And the coach goes flying. He falls down. I'm like, dang, this guy is strong. And he is moving with some fluidity that you never used to see that with offensive linemen. Like the ability to move, the ability to get out in space. It's a different game. And yeah, you can watch the wide receivers and the cornerbacks put up really great 40 times. To me, that's kind of ho-hum. I expect you to run a good 40 time if you're a starting wide receiver or a cornerback in the NFL. Last year, Joey Porter Jr. ran, it was like closer to 4.4, something like that. And everyone's like, oh, what a poor run. That used to be a banner run in the 40-yard dash. And he's still a quality player. I love watching these big guys. I love watching the big guys move. And quarterbacks throwing to receivers with no coverage, there's no pass rush. It just doesn't do anything for me. So I guess if I had to pick one, I guess it's not a player or accomplishment. It's just the fact that I love watching these big dudes, offensive and defensive line, show off their athleticism, because those guys are athletes too. And on the day where Jason Kelce announced his retirement, he was pretty good in space as well. So I figured I'd give them some credence there. What do you think, Coach?
Yeah, heck yeah. And, to what you're saying about those linemen, the body types have changed of those guys up front. I mean, linemen used to kind of be big, fat guys, the Nate Newton type model. They are not like that anymore. And Jason Kelce was at one of our high school practices a couple years ago. Some of the Eagles came down. Vinny Curry, our team trainer, trained Vinny Curry. He brought some Eagles down, and they were at our practice. Jason Kelce did not have any fat on him. I mean, he was a burly guy, big, thick barrel chest, huge shoulders, etc. He had no belly to speak of. It was really impressive. He just looked like, I don't know what his playing weight was at the time. I'm going to guess around 300 pounds, but he looked like about as svelte a 300 pounds as you could possibly be. Yeah. And so the game is different. There's so many like stretch schemes now in the game. Offensive linemen are expected to be able to move in space and climb to the second level. And I think that you're seeing a reflection of that at the combine. This is not 1994 where everybody's lining up with a fullback and trying to vertically push the defensive line. There's so much horizontal stretch that you got to be able to move laterally.
Real quick, any thoughts on the retirement of Jason Kelce from the Philadelphia Eagles in football?
Yeah, he's a legend, man. He will go up in the pantheon of Philadelphia sports figures. If they had a Mount Rushmore of Philadelphia sports figures, he might not be on there as the best player, but certainly is one of the most inspirational. Philly fans will forever love him for the speech he made dressed as one of the mummers at their Super Bowl celebration about 5 years ago. And his speech, man, where he got choked up and tearful and spoke from the heart, it just tells you how much being a professional football player meant to him. And so, that's must see, viewing for any young football player, man. Any young football player who wants to know what it means to these guys should watch Jason Kelce's speech from Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. And so Jason Kelce hanging it up. The Eagles are going to have to try and figure out life without him for a first time in a long time. And that's going to be interesting. We'll talk about that as this new league year is getting ready to kick off next week. But let's go to our second topic. Caleb Williams was a big talking point at the NFL Scouting Combine. He's the heavy favorite to be the top pick in the draft. The Bears have that pick. We expect they're going to take him. He didn't work out at the Combine. He declined to be examined. So no teams got medicals from him at all. And his father tends to be a micromanager of his affairs, which includes serving as his agent. Are any of these red flags to you? And what degree would you be concerned if you were the Bears?
Yeah, the meddling father troubles me.
Yeah.
Not because like they get in the way in the professional level, at the professional level, the way that they can get in the way at the high school level. You were a high school coach. I'm sure you had more than a few parents that you butted heads with. I think that's probably a safe statement, right?
Yes.
You don't deal with them like that. But if your father has been guiding and advising you your entire life to the point that where now here you are expected to be a leader of men. I mean, Caleb Williams is going to have to step into a huddle of grown men, 6'6", 320-pound, 30-year-olds who have, wives and children and mortgages. And this is a business to them. And he's got to conduct them as their leader. And I just worry sometimes about a guy who hasn't been given the independence by whether it's his parents or could be an agent, some other figure that has maybe micromanaged and guided that person. How are they going to do when the system doesn't allow for that person to be involved anymore? Can they be that guy that they need to be? That'll be my big concern about Williams.
It all ties back to his dad probably, because he's probably the one that's giving him advice and giving him some direction here with how he should handle himself. The fact that he's not working out is not a big deal. He was not the only quarterback to not throw. That's been a year-long tradition going back way back into the early 2000s of quarterbacks saying, look, I'm just not going to throw. I have nothing to prove here. Whatever. That's fine. But when he says, I'm not going to let you examine him, like, what are you trying to hide? And maybe you're not trying to hide anything, but if it sure does, if you're talking about red flags, that's a big one for me. So if I'm the Chicago Bears, I want my medical staff to give you a once over. Okay, let's look at your knees. Let's look at your arm. Let's look at, all this stuff. And he says, no, coach, like that's got to be a red flag to you too, right? That to me, I'm saying, what are you trying to hide in this instance? Do you agree or disagree?
No, I agree. He said he would allow the teams to examine him when he goes there on his visits, his personal visits, however that is arranged. I don't know the rules for all that.
Well, the pre-draft visits,
but why be a contrarian in that regard? It doesn't seem. What are you benefiting from by not letting the doctors at the combine look at you? I don't understand what that strategy is. And again, that just is another little thing that makes you go like, hey, is this guy going to be a team player, or is he like what we sometimes call an own dealer? Like, is he on his own deal? And when you're on your own deal, a lot of times, then that signals problems ahead.
Yeah, because I hate to paint a picture of a guy. I don't know. I've never met him, But when
Agreed.
you have these things happening, you can't not think, okay, if we're going to take him first overall, we are mortgaging our future into this player. Is he going to be an issue in 4 years? Like, is he not going to play under the 5th-year option, even though we have that contractual option with the NLPA and the collective bargaining agreement? These type of things have to be going through their heads, all based on the fact that he's acting kind of funny right now. And so, yeah, I think it's a big red flag. I'm not saying they're not going to take him. And I even heard rumors that last year, if he was considering going into the NFL draft, he was talking about wanting a portion of ownership of a team if he actually got drafted, which maybe that's the future for some of these players, is giving them some stake in the organization that they play for. But man, to say that coming out of college, I don't know. Any last thoughts on Caleb Williams?
His father already said that he did not want him to play for the Bears. Now he's walked that back, but still, that again, what is the vibe that you're putting out right there? If they draft him, they're obviously moving on from Justin Fields. Say what you want about Justin Fields, the player, but Justin Fields, the teammate, has never been an issue. His teammates speak very, very highly of him. They say he's a good leader. He's a really good locker room guy. And so is it worth moving on from a guy who may not have reached his potential yet as a player, but a glue guy who can keep everybody together, for a guy who might be a better talent but can be a disruption? That's a calculus that the Bears better get right.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's just, again, why be a contrarian? Why give any team a reason to second guess potentially drafting? Maybe it's that he doesn't want to go to Chicago. I don't know. But let's go to our next topic. Speaking of not working out, it's becoming increasingly trendy for the Combine's top prospects to skip on-field work and just do interviews and respective team formal interviews, things like that. It's getting to be a bit like bowl games when you think about players that are not participating because they're getting ready for the NFL. The NFL loves the Combine. It has become a media spectacle, massive TV draw on ratings. It's like the unofficial start of the new league year. But do they have a problem here? Is the Combine not the institution that it once was? What are your thoughts on the Combine in and of itself, Coach?
I wouldn't say the NFL is a problem yet, but I do believe that they are now facing a dilemma whereby they may have to make some concessions to some of these bigger stars, some of these bigger guys who would much rather show off at their pro day on their campus with their guys, their receivers, their coaches, etc. A much more comfortable environment for them. I think that the way that the NFL has marketed all of it is brilliant. They've gotten you and I have already spent 15 minutes talking about a thing that is not even a competitive sporting event, right? And it's brilliant in that sense. The TV ratings are great. And I don't think they want to let go of that for sure. So they're going to have to figure out how, moving forward, do we keep the high profile players involved to continue to draw that big TV audience. Now, like football nerds like myself, I'll watch no matter what, just because I love it. And there's always compelling stories to me. But a lot of fans, yeah, they absolutely want to see the top guys. I mean, I would have loved to have seen Marvin Harrison go through the wide receiver drills, more so than watching like you say, the quarterbacks just throw on air. You do get to see the receivers and their burst and their agility and all that stuff. It'd be awesome to watch Marvin Harrison, but I'm not going to boycott it because he's not there. There may be some people who do, though. So at what point does the NFL say, let's rethink the way that we do this so that it can be a little more inclusive?
I think, just in my opinion, if the NFL's smart, they say to these athletes, just like you have to declare for the NFL draft, you have to declare whether you're going to test or you're not. The whole picking and choosing thing, because what I would do is, if, let's say, Marvin Harrison, you brought him up, which I believe you did. You hate wide receivers, but nonetheless, you brought him up and he says, I'm not testing at all. I will interview, but I'm not going to test. So, okay, he can go and he can make his rounds with all the teams that want to meet with him formally, informally, whatever. Give that invite to work out to someone else. Invite another kid who is like, I'd love to have the opportunity to go to the Combine and put my tape out there because I think I can do it. I think I can prove people wrong. I would want to see someone take his place. And so that's what kind of ticks me off the most, is that I was, as an athlete myself, I was never the biggest, fastest, or strongest. I just wanted an opportunity. And so even though there were people way more talented than me, they never outworked me. But if I had an opportunity, like in this case, to go to the combine because so-and-so wasn't going to test, I would jump at that opportunity. And so maybe the NFL would have something there. Let's go with the lesser name players. If the big name players aren't going to test, there's plenty of other talent out there. Maybe it's more day 2 and day 3 type players. I don't think that there's going to be any less of a draw from people like yourself that are football fiends that just want to watch something football related. Let's see who can turn heads. What about that kid from the MAC who would just like an opportunity to run the 40 and he runs a 4.25? Oh, now you've got my now you've got my attention as a coach. I don't know. What do you think about that proposal I just laid out?
No, I think there's great stories like that every year that deserve to come to light. Last year, there was a wide receiver from Princeton named Andre Iosivas or Iosivas. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He wound up with the Bengals and had actually a pretty good rookie season. But he was a fascinating story because he had never been a football player. He was a track guy. He qualified for the Olympics in like the 800 relay, something along those lines. And then lands at Princeton and finds his way to the football field and then blew up at the combine, had a phenomenal combine. I mean, his track background obviously killed the broad jump. He killed the vertical leap. He ran a great 40. And suddenly now he gets on the radar. It leads to him being drafted by Cincinnati, and he goes and he has a good rookie year. So, I mean, I think there are stories like that are absolutely worth following. And it would be great if the NFL, if they can't get the Marvin Harrisons on a regular basis to work out, shed some light on those other guys, the like you said, the D3 guys, the MAC guys, who are the stories that you want to root for as a fan.
For sure. Now, let me ask you another follow-up here about pro days, which they're going to be coming up after that. That's typically after the league year starts is when pro days start to kick off. And you have universities like Alabama have 2 days to give players enough time and all that. I think it's either the Big 10 or the Big 12 is doing a conference pro day this year where all these teams are getting together and almost having their mini combine. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I love it in theory. I love it if the Big 10 was the Big 10, but the Big 10's what now, like the Big 20? I don't even know how many teams are in the Big 10. But I do like that idea. I like a regional combine. And it would be nice too to see them. I mean, you could have a combine from the state of Ohio, and it would be Ohio State and Toledo and the MAC schools and that, et cetera. I mean, that might be an interesting way to go as well. You get a little bit of competitiveness in there. And I mean, again, I think if the NFL for as dumb as they can be with their tone deafness at times, they're brilliant in terms of marketing. And so they could probably find a way to better market the combine or at least farm it out in ways that can also be productive.
It'll be let's look at Pennsylvania. We both like the Steelers. So if you had a Pennsylvania pro day, I mean, you'd be able to have Penn State, you'd have the University of Pittsburgh. If you wanted to go into the lower rankings, you could have certainly some smaller schools. Your university, you could have some people from Gettysburg there.
Go
right?
Bullets! Let's go. Go Bullets!
But I mean, Pennsylvania, you would also have Rutgers, right? And that's New Jersey.
Rutgers is in Jersey. But you'd have Penn, the Ivy League. You got Temple. You'd have Temple. You got a ton of the 1AAs like Bucknell and Lafayette and Lehigh, and they always have, one guy. They always got one guy that gets a shot. Schools like that, and then you get these even the little D2s that you want to root for, like a Slippery Rock. And people, who's not going to root for a guy from Slippery Rock, right?
See, but you'd have to have it almost have to be regional because you would have to include West Virginia. So you'd have to invite WVU. You get some Shepherd people to go. Marshall University would be represented. So you'd have those schools that could still send some talent to those regional. I like the idea. I could also see why some schools like Alabama say, we're just going to do our own thing. Sure. University of Michigan, we're just going to do Georgia. You know what I'm talking about. Yep. But these other schools, let's pull them together. Anyways, let's go to some non-combine news for our next topic. The running back market is set to be a big one this offseason as no star free agents at the position are expected to be franchise tagged. We're talking Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Tony Pollard, Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, to name a few. If you were a team in the market for a top running back, which one of these players would you target?
Hmm. I think on talent and ability alone, Saquon Barkley is the guy, but he can't stay healthy. He's not really been able to string together a full season. Um, so you have to almost look at it as like, who are you and what do you want? So as Steeler fans, I think we're all terrified of like the Ravens adding Derrick Henry because he's still got some tread on his tires. You know,
Yeah.
he can still play. He's not a guy who's shot. He had about 1,400 yards rushing last season behind a terrible line in Tennessee. And you put him in a system like Baltimore's, and that's pretty terrifying. So, I mean, it's going to be one of those things where you say, like, hey, man, are we like, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs and you're looking for a compliment to Isaiah Pacheco, maybe you kick the tires on Tony Pollard, who would seem to fit wonderfully in that system, the way they throw the ball to the backs and get their guys out in space, etc. So I think they're really intriguing names. The interesting thing for me is going to be this. What's the top dollar that any of those guys are going to get? Because last offseason, the big conversation was about the running back market being devalued. And then, you had guys like talking about holding out and doing things like that to try to bring attention to that issue. It'll be very interesting to see if any of those guys gets a significant contract or if they're giving them 1 and 2 year deals with the understanding that you guys might not, be what you are right now in a couple of years.
Well, I would say if I'm an owner or GM, I'm not giving him any more than 2 years. That's the max. Look at these players. Every single one of them has something. Saquon Barkley, health issues. You talked about it. Josh Jacobs has a lot of wear on his tires. He's had some health issues as well. He was banged up last season. Austin Eckler can't stay healthy anymore, it seems like. Derrick Henry, last year was healthy. Year prior, dealt with a lot of issues. DeAndre Swift seems to always be banged up, even though he kind of showed some life in Philadelphia. None of these players are those guys that they're hitting for the free agent market and everyone's going to want them. So you have to wonder, will there even be a bidding war for any of these players? Or will it be, we see it every offseason, especially at the running back position, these deals that go out and like, man, they got him for how much? That's it? Because he's not a receiver and he's not a quarterback or he's not a pass rusher, the big positions of value in today's National Football League. If I had to pick, though, man, there's something about Austin Eckler. That guy is fun to watch. I just have always liked him. He's a small guy. He's got a chip on his shoulder. I think he went undrafted or a late round draft pick. I think he still has some spark left in him, but we'll see. I just hope to hell Derrick Henry doesn't go to Baltimore.
Yeah. You and me both, brother. But when you watch the combine and you look at the size and the speed of the linebackers and the defensive linemen, you can totally understand why running backs in the NFL can't last more than 4 or 5 good years anymore. It's physically impossible to hold up as a feature back getting 200 some carries a year against those physical specimens. They're just too big and too strong. Injuries are inevitable.
Well, who would you say is the elite running back in the NFL today? Christian McCaffrey, or is there someone else?
To me, 100%. McCaffrey.
Okay. What makes him so good? He's his ability to run inside, outside, but also to be a weapon in the passing game.
Yes.
So when you look at someone like Derrick Henry, he can run in between the tackles. Can he outrun these linemen and linebackers anymore at his age to the outside to get the edge? Not so sure. Is he a pass catcher? Not really. So you are limited when you come to some of these players. Now, a Saquon Barkley, he can kind of do it all. But again, you got the health factors. DeAndre Swift's the same. It's interesting. These young guys, too, these running backs that are coming into the league, they tend to be more of a do-it-all type player naturally. And it almost is part of the job description in college. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there with the running back market. Let's talk about some news that recently happened in the NFL. 2 things I want to bring up. First and foremost is the Buccaneers re-signing Mike Evans to a 2-year, $52 million deal. $36 million of that guaranteed. Your thoughts on that?
Good for Mike Evans, man. That guy's been a pro's pro down in Tampa Bay. I won a Super Bowl down there, but he's also been through some lean times, had an opportunity to test the free agent market and decided to stay. And I think a guy like that should be rewarded. He's going to be 31, but he can still play at over 1,000 receiving yards this past year. And I think that's one of those. That's kind of like a feel good thing for me, man. It's a good faith deal on the Bucs part. They're rewarding him for coming back. and good for him for, not trying to squeeze every last nickel out of that franchise or just, chasing the highest bidder on the free agent market.
I mean, he is guaranteed $36 million. That's not like he's not shopping at Dollar General.
None of them are, man. None of them are.
But let me say this. This to me tells me as a fan that Baker Mayfield's not going anywhere. There's no way in hell that Mike Evans signed a 2-year deal. I don't care about the millions that are guaranteed if Kyle Trask is in line to be the quarterback. It's just not going to happen. Baker Mayfield, they want to lock him up. This to me says that they went to Mike Evans and said, look, Baker's going to be back. You had a good year with him. He's going to be better. He's going to be in the system for another year. Don't worry, we'll be good. That's what I read from this more so. Yeah, you're right on all fronts of it. Yes, a good faith movement, a good faith move by Mike Evans, but still, I think that means that Baker Mayfield will be back. The second storyline.
Well, real quick, man, isn't it
interesting?
Sure. Real quick, isn't it interesting how fortunes change in the NFL? Because if you had said 2 years ago that the lure to bring Mike Evans back to Tampa was Baker Mayfield, we would be like, you're out of your mind. But he went and he kind of reinvented his career down there, and you make a good point about him.
It can happen. It can reinventing your career can happen in the National Football League. Let's go to the second topic, one we want to talk about a lot because it can tie in with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that is Russell Wilson. The news was released on Monday that he is going to be released. They're expecting it to be after the new league year begins, prior to, I think, March 16th is when something would happen contractually. But he is on the books for a crap ton of money. This deal, when you look at the draft capital given up by Denver, the amount of money they're going to have to owe Russell Wilson for only 2 years of service and 2 losing seasons is mind-blowing. How much money? Coach, what did you think about Russell Wilson? We knew he was going to get released, but it's just becoming official.
Yeah. $85 million in dead money the Broncos are going to eat. That's more than twice the largest amount of dead money ever absorbed by a team. That just will underscore how wrong it went there in Denver. Russell Wilson released a statement thanking the city and thanking his teammates, and it was full of people that he was appreciative of. And notably absent from that list was Sean Payton. He didn't say a word about Sean Payton. So obviously, that was a huge problem. That's one of the biggest misses in NFL history, right? I mean, just that signing into that contract and then moving on this quickly and eating all that money. That's got to be a top 5 miss all time in contract history.
Well, that was a trade, was it not? Because they traded with Seattle to get him, and Seattle got a couple firsts, I think, and a couple seconds. It might not on the same draft. To me, that's up there with the Herschel Walker trade. Now, the Dallas Cowboys turned that into, what turned into the 90s dynasty, that trade, and we don't know what Seattle's going to do with those picks. But yeah, it has to go down as one of the worst trades. And then you throw in what they gave up to the New Orleans Saints, the Denver Broncos, that is, for Sean Payton.
Right.
And boy, are they digging themselves a hole. And the GM has survived all of it.
Yeah.
He's still there.
Yeah, he knows where the bodies are buried for sure, man.
He's got naked.
So where's Wilson going to end up? That's now, people pivot to that. You brought it up last week on the show. He had a pretty good year last year. I mean, he the numbers wise, at least as far as the chemistry and all, no, not so much, but he showed on the field, man, he can still play. So where's he go?
I don't know. I mean, let's look at the teams. We kind of talked about this last week a little bit. Atlanta seems to be either Kirk Cousins or Justin Fields. You said Justin Fields would be the best fit. I'll tell everyone to go check out the YouTube video you did this past week on our YouTube channel, Fans First Sports Network. The Raiders, but I don't think that necessarily fits with Russell Wilson. Maybe, I don't know. Who are New England? Doubt it. It's really interesting. Pittsburgh is going to be a name that's going to always be brought up because everyone's assuming, and this could be a hasty assumption, that Russell Wilson is going to play for league minimum. That he'll say, hey, I'm making $39 million from Denver this year. You can pay me $2 million for this season and I'm fine. Maybe if that's the case, then there might be a lot of teams that are interested. And I would think Pittsburgh would be one, wouldn't you?
Sure. They would be silly not to reach out, especially if they can't get a deal done with Mason Rudolph. I would think a team like Philadelphia would express some interest. Jalen Hurts kind of limped down the stretch with some injuries. last year, and Russell Wilson does a lot of things that Jalen Hurts does. Seem to be a decent fit. And if Russell Wilson wants to go somewhere where he can contend, that might be a spot. So I think there's probably teams that we're not aware of and that nobody's talking about that will be in on Russell Wilson if, as you said, he's willing to come in at a low number.
Yeah, it's a big if. He could say, I still want X number of million. And then that'll eliminate some of those teams. One of the probably being the Pittsburgh Steelers. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, we got to do a profile here. And you wanted to talk about Chris Mortensen. Before you talk about Chris Mortensen, I want to do another one on Andy Russell. Now, Andy Russell, for those that are listening that are not Steeler fans, he was one of the few, the Marine Corps is one of the few, the proud, the United States Marines. Andy Russell is one of the few. He was drafted in 66. People don't realize this. Chuck Noll was hired in 69. When Chuck Noll came into the Steelers, he gutted that roster. I mean, gutted the coaching staff, the roster. I think there were only 3 players that lasted from the previous regime into the Chuck Noll era and won a Super Bowl. And Andy Russell was one of those. He was a legendary player. He actually was a very established player, meaning his Pro Bowls. Some think he should be in the Hall of Fame. And so he passed away this past weekend, I believe, at 82 years old. And so rest in peace, Andy Russell. Any thoughts on him as a linebacker for the Steelers?
Yeah, 5 straight Pro Bowls. That's after he was drafted and went and did a 2-year service because he didn't serve in Vietnam, but he had gone into active service to fulfill his obligation, and then came back to the Steelers. And I was a little kid when the Steelers won their first Super Bowls, and I don't really remember Andy Russell, and but because he was kind of the veteran of that group. But you always, every time I think about Steelers number 34, I would, obviously you think, oh, Andy Russell. So yeah, 82 years old, man. He had a good run.
He had a scoop and score one time, a 93-yard fumble recovery return for a touchdown. Myron Cope famously said, we went to commercial break and came back, and Andy Russell still hadn't gotten into the end zone. That's how slow he was. All right, but let's talk about the great Chris Mortensen, the Mort Report, as I remember and always will remember. He passed away succumbed to cancer. Your thoughts? And it was really emotional for a lot of people at the Combine when the news broke. I think it was on Sunday. What did you want to talk about with Chris Mortensen?
Yeah, I mean, I had a chance to meet Chris Mortensen once at a golf outing, and it was one of those things where there was a bunch of NFL guys playing in the outing, and local football coaches who were there, and media people, etc. And most of the NFL guys were cool. They'd shake your hand and say hi, but I mean, it was a lot of them were there to play golf and schmooze with their buddies, and they were happy to do that. But when I met Chris Mortensen, he actually, like, it felt like he was taking an interest in you. He asked questions about you. He found out I was a coach, and he wanted to know about our team. And like, he didn't need to do any of that. It would have been cool if he just shook my hand and said, nice to meet you. But that little interaction with him meshed with all the reactions that came out the other day when it announced that he had passed. Just so many people talking about what a genuine person he was, what a caring guy he was, one of the nicest, kindest people that you'll meet in a competitive industry where, hey, let's face it, man, what he's doing is very cutthroat business, where you got to break the story, and there's a lot of competition and a lot of rivalry and things like that. Seems like a guy who really just was able to stay true to himself and be who he was, and never let the fact that he was successful get in the way of who he was as a person. So that's a big loss, I think, for the sporting community.
When someone like Peyton Manning goes out on his verified Instagram page and says that he trusted Chris Mortensen, and only Chris Mortensen, with the news of when he was going to Denver and when he was retiring. He gave him those stories because he trusted him, and he also knew it was going to be done the right way. That speaks volumes when you're talking about Peyton Manning. I think also, to your story, we all should remember that even sometimes the little interactions and showing interest in what people actually do care about can go a really long way. So like you said, Chris Mortensen didn't have to ask about your football team and where you coach. He could have just said, yeah, nice to meet you, shake your hands, move on with your life. Instead, you now have that interaction embedded in your brain. And I think we all can learn that even our day-to-day interactions with others can have an impact. So that was a good story. I do appreciate that, Coach. All right. What are your final thoughts, Coach, before we call it a week?
Well, now we really get down to business. I
Yeah.
mean, we've done the the evaluation and all that kind of stuff, and the league year opens next week.
Yep.
And man, it'll start rolling fast. It's incredible the amount of news and information that will be flying in once the free agency period opens up, and then you kind of roll right into the draft. So, yeah, I'm excited. Let's get rolling.
The next time we record, there will already be rumors and numbers already attached to free agents with the legal tampering period starting next Monday. Nothing will become official until the league year starts on Wednesday, but we will be talking about actual free agents with new homes the next time we're on the NFL Whip Round. So, Coach, thank you very much for your time. Everyone else, thank you for listening. We'll see you next week. Take it easy, Coach.